Welcome to another episode of Commissions, where we look at mission work and things surrounding mission work. And today I've got Suria with me. Suria, thank you very much for joining me.
It's a privilege to be here. Thanks, Jacques.
Now, we are going to be discussing something very dangerous. When I spoke to you on the phone about this, you said, no ways, and I forced you to talk to me about this. But you were not only a missionary, you were a mother while being a missionary. I want to talk about that. But before we get to that, when did you start with missionary work?
I think I went on my first outreach as a student. It didn't leave a lasting impression, but it definitely planted some seeds. Okay. I think it was very rural, and I didn't quite see myself in such a rural setup. But fast forward, life happens, and I had a very strong calling, I think, after that to go into missions.
Okay. But okay, so I always ask people when we start speaking about missions, what is the picture of missions that you had?
Yeah, that's the thing. It was very rural. It was the mud hut. It was the cow dung. It was the foreign language. It was having to go and fetch water with the other woman. It was that picture.
Okay.
And it ended up being that picture.
Okay. So that did become the reality?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you did the real picture of missionary work in Africa under a tree or a hut or everything. What did God tell you?
I think I had a very strong sense that He told me before I went off into missions that He would give me an open door that no man can shut, and that He saw I had a little strength and obviously zero capacity for that, what He was calling me into, but He really enables us. And so, in the meantime, of course, I understand that missions is everywhere, and but it was very traditional in the beginning.
Okay, now there's a very interesting part to your story. So you went into the missions field, you did missionary work, and then you met someone.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that interesting person that you met.
I met my husband, Koen, and we got married. And I think you go into the field and you think, that's it, full stop, right?
Did you expect to meet your husband, a missionary in the field? How on earth? Because, he goes into the missions field as a young man, and if I'm correct, you go into it with a very strong opinion about what you're going to do for the Lord. And it seems like you had that conviction, and he's got that conviction. Yes. Wasn't that like two comets just flying into each other with a big bang?
A little bit. I think we really talked about missions and explored missions and had endless conversations about missions forever, every single aspect of it. And we knew very little, but it was the topic of our lives.
Oh, wow. And okay, so you got married.
Yeah.
And then you went back into the missions field.
I went back to the missions field, very traditional, went back to India. With him, I was there in India before I met Koen. I didn't have a strong calling for India. I was sent to India, but I loved it. But I do think I had a very romantic picture of missions. Okay. And I think that was the first thing that the Lord had to break down a little bit. So I ended up also for long after being married to Koen, feeding 50 to 60 people every day out of a missions kitchen while they were doing what I thought was missions work.
Oh, wow.
And I had to just, wasn't good enough, the devil told me, to do missions work. You just have to feed them. So I had my own little journey, and I had my own tantrums, which I threw.
So you almost then became the missionary's wife instead of the missionary.
Yeah, I think there were definitely aspects of that, and there was definitely confusion as well in the beginning, because I had a perception and an idea of how it should like, and then Koen had a perception, an idea how it should look like. And I think where things started to really look good for us was when Koen said, but he felt that God said that we must start to train missionaries, which were now going to take us out of the field completely.
Okay.
But we really wanted to be in the field.
Okay.
But we poured our hearts into training more. All I could think of, well, if I can't do it, and if I can't be there 24/7, imagine if there are 10 or 20 or 30 of us.
Yeah.
And so the multiplication and that whole specific place where we found ourselves, that even though we're not the pioneer missionary, we were hoping to train up other pioneer missionaries.
Okay.
So that was a beautiful season, really. I really felt that I could live out, writing the curriculum and putting it all together. It was a lot of fun.
Now, the reason why I contacted you and said that I want to do this interview is basically this question. So you got married to a missionary. You guys went out and did missionary work. And like all families, most families, you had kids as missionaries. Yeah. How on earth did you manage that?
Yeah. And then we didn't just have kids, we had many children.
Many children.
It was in India. I always say all good stories starts in India.
Okay.
And so I came across Amy Carmichael, and her story deeply inspired me. And so long before we were even thinking of contemplating having our own kids, we both decided we're gonna adopt. And he had a story about adoption too. So here the two of us were sitting, and we actually adopted before we had our own children.
Okay, so let's just make that part clear. You did have two of your own kids?
Yes.
But in total, you had 16 kids?
At one stage. I had 2 biological kids, 9 adopted kids, and then I helped another 2 families to raise their kids as they were in an extremely pioneer situation for 4 years.
How on earth did you manage that?
I look back over a very dry season with God.
Okay.
In many instances, I love books, as some of you know by now. And all I could think back to those beginning years in the kitchen was, why didn't anybody give me Brother Lawrence's book of practicing the presence of God?
Okay.
And I think it became a reality in this season of motherhood, where it was just very little sleep for a very long time. And then God gave me 2 children that slept through for the first time, the oldest when she was 6 years old.
Really?
So I cannot tell you. Somebody asked me, how was it possible that you could read through the Left Behind series, 7 books in 5 days? I was like, and that's easy. You just up the whole time. And while you're trying to calm the one down, I'm just reading, I'm like, this is going to happen sometime.
And so you basically raised them along with the other kids and things.
Yes.
What happened to the mission work?
Yeah, good question.
Because raising kids is a mission on its own.
It is, and it is a beautiful ministry, and it is the most rewarding ministry. And Jacques, the nonsense we believe in our heads. I believe God raised me up to be a mother. And when I told you in the beginning there's a tension between motherhood and missionary work, it actually is the perfect crossroads to meet a new generation where you can really build into their lives. It's not easy, it was hard. I look back and I think, what were we thinking? But at the same time, I have the most beautiful memories, and so do they, of some of the Bible studies we had at nighttime. We would come together, and every night it would be an absolute highlight. We had a praise and worship night. We had a puppet called Molly Monkey, and Molly Monkey, the kids actually fight about who's going to inherit Molly Monkey one day. So I had to lock her up in my cupboard until that day, and then they can fight over her after my death, because she told the most extraordinary mission stories. Molly Monkey was an absolute hit.
So you find ways to make it entertaining and to keep the kids busy.
Yes.
And also teach them.
Yes.
In a very creative way.
Because we also did a little preschool at one stage, and various of the children that we adopted, we realized that their English wasn't good enough, and so I've come out of a teacher background. You know, I used to sit with them and did a lot of homeschooling for some time with some of the children. Yeah.
So here's the big question: did any of them decide to become missionaries as well?
Yeah, very interesting. I have about 3 or 4 missionaries in the family. Yes, which is extraordinary if you think back on it, in this crazy household that we had. What is amazing about that season was the joy. One of the older kids once looked back through the albums, and she had to write a project in school called It's My Life.
Okay.
And it was quite something to read how she said we were very poor at that stage. And I thought she wouldn't have known, she was too small. But she said we never knew it, and we were always happy, and there was always something to do. They say there's 3 things that you have to give kids: something to think about, something or someone to love, and something to do. And I think somehow in those years, those 3 things were really very well met.
Okay. And that carried you guys through?
And that carried them through, and it carried us through.
Would you say that God equipped you to do this?
Oh, He does. He does. You know, I did not become born again, you know, under my parents' guidance, even though they took me to church Sunday after Sunday. I came to know the Lord when I was 19 years of age. So I did not want that to happen to my children.
Okay.
So I read a lot in trying to make sure that each child had a real relationship with the Lord. And so some of them, you know, it was a hard journey for some of them, and it is for some of them a hard journey. But it's wonderful also to see my adopted children raising their children and in the ways and doing the same poems and some of the same things I did with them. Very rewarding.
Would you do it again?
Yes, but maybe not as many. No, but even halfway through it, we started to ask ourselves, what were we thinking, you know? It was just like, and once all the beds were full, I'm just, praise God, there wasn't more beds, because it would have been more kids.
Yeah. Suria, thank you so much for sharing with us your journey, a little bit of your journey, because I think there's so much more adventures that you guys had. And I'm sure that we are all encouraged that if you guys could do it, we can do it. And things. Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Absolutely. It was a privilege.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of Commissioned. And I want to leave this idea with you. Even if God gives you a vision and a dream and situation that is so big that you have no idea how you're going to overcome it, remember that He will always equip you to do it. We'll see you in the next episode of Commissioned.